Hey everyone, it's Lindsay. I'm actually right about to go to bed. I'm getting ready to go to sleep. It's pretty late here in London, but before I was going to do some bedtime reading and thought I'd bring everyone in on that. So I just got this book, actually just arrived off of Amazon. It's called Pushback, Guilt in the Age of Natural Parenting, and it is by Amy Tutor, a medical doctor. Really interested in this book. It's a lot about, I guess, the kind of misconceptions about the pregnancy, about birth, about childbirth, and I'll go ahead and read the back. In her provocative call to arms, Harvard-trained OBGYN, and mother of four, Dr. Amy Tutor, answers these questions as she fearlessly takes on the natural parenting industry. The midwives, doulas, lactation consultants, and attachment parenting experts who have created a big business out of enforcing a set of unrealistic standards that often make women feel inadequate and can be dangerous. Pushback exposes the truth about natural childbirth, breastfeeding, and attachment parenting, and encourages women to let go of guilt, defy the madness, and reclaim the most basic of rights, control over their own bodies, and ultimately raise healthy children. Amy Tutor, MD, is an obstetrician gynecologist and the author of How Your Baby is Born. With degrees from Harvard College and Boston University School of Medicine, Tutor practiced obstetrics at Beth Israel Hospital and was a clinical instructor at Harvard Medical School. Her blog, The Skeptical OB, speaks to all aspects of the natural parenting debate. So this is a book that I was very interested in because I actually want to be an OBGYN. As you all know, I'm currently about halfway through my master's degree in public health, and then I would like to go on to medical school from there, and eventually I would like to be OBGYN. So very interested in reading this book. So let's go ahead and do some bedtime story with Nancy. Introduction. Several hundred years ago, a famous philosopher said, Cogito ergo sum. I think, therefore I am. My motto is a bit different. I mother, therefore I am guilty. If you are a mother, and chances are that if you are reading this book you are, then this may be your motto too. My children are grown now, but I have not forgotten the pervasive feeling of guilt that parenting can engender. It has ever been thus. I can't help you with most of the guilt that comes naturally with mothering, the guilt over school choice, screen time, sibling rivalry, or discipline styles, but there is one area in which I can offer comfort. There is no reason to feel guilty about any childbirth choices or choices of early infancy. No woman should ever feel guilty about the choices she makes regarding childbirth, breastfeeding, or the manner in which she cares for her baby. Surprised? Unfortunately, we live in a society where these fundamental aspects of a woman's life are now an arena where judgment, second-guessing, and guilt reign supreme. It is no longer enough to give birth to a healthy baby and to care for that baby, providing food, warmth, and tenderness. Now all of these acts must be done, in many circles, in ways decreed correct by the natural parenting industry. Where did this industry that dictates the behaviors of millions of women come from? Surprisingly, the currently popular philosophies of natural childbirth, lactivism, and attachment parenting are based on nothing more than the personal beliefs of a few individuals, most of them men. To my mind, though, the most damaging aspect of this paradigm is that the judgment and guilt surrounding childbirth and childcare are heaped upon women most often by other women. I am an obstetrician and the mother of 4 children. When I stopped practicing obstetrics, I became a writer, focused of course on women and childbirth. Along the way, I saw that there needed to be a voice of reason in the wilds of the internet focused on mothers and childbirth. So I have spent the last 20 years becoming she who must not be named, enemy number 1 of the natural parenting industry. Why? because I have made it my mission to help women escape the feelings of guilt about their birth experience that trap them long after their children are born. I challenge the popular notions out there that are so often rooted in pseudoscience. I offer comfort to expectant and new mothers as they face the difficult task of caring for a newborn while simultaneously listening to a cacophony of voices telling them how to have their babies, how to feed them, how to hold them, and that if they don't follow these edicts, their babies will not thrive and become successful adults. I've used science, common sense, and kindness to dispel what I see as the myths luring women in despair. I've poked holes in the theories of natural parenting proponents, and in the process I've made some enemies, but I've made a lot more women feel a lot better. Pushback is my boldest statement yet, and it represents how my own thinking on this topic has evolved over the years. Initially, I was simply bewildered by the ways in which my parents tormented themselves. After delivering a beautiful, healthy baby to a joyous, healthy mother, I would visit her the next day in the hospital and find her tearful over her failure. Instead of enjoying the miracle of her new child, she would be berating herself that she had given in and gotten an epidural for pain relief. Or perhaps she would have concluded that her C-section reflected the fact that her body was broken. There was a myriad of if-onlys. If only she hadn't agreed to the post-term induction. If only she had trusted birth more. Sometimes I wonder if the process of birth was more important than the baby itself. When I was a practicing obstetrician, I spent a lot of time correcting the misinformation of natural childbirth advocates and comforting women who'd had healthy babies but still felt guilty for not achieving a vaginal birth or a birth without pain relief. Though I was aware of the emotional response from my bedside visits, it took years of blogging about the subject, corresponding with mothers, and arguing with activists to appreciate the true depth, breadth, and prevalence of misinformation coming from the natural parenting movement, and how this has come to blight the experience of mothering infants for so many. 20 years ago, when I began writing on the web, I thought that the problem could be solved with more and better information. Most of what passes for knowledge within the natural childbirth, lactivist, and natural parenting communities is flat out false. Yet simply correcting the plethora of falsehoods seemed to be fruitless. I came to understand that natural childbirth, lactivism, and attachment parenting actually are about privileging the process over the outcome. Natural childbirth, lactivism, and attachment parenting are highly stylized, profoundly idealized representations of parenting. How do we know that they are idealized? Primarily, it's because the scientific evidence does not support most of their central tenets. That's not to say that natural parenting advocates don't believe in science. They do, and they invoke science a lot. However, a close examination reveals that they often subvert the scientific evidence to arrive at predetermined conclusions. Why would anyone want to subvert the scientific evidence on childbirth, breastfeeding, and attachment parenting? Because each of these ideas has morphed into business, complete with trade unions, lobbying groups, and brilliant marketing. Simply put, misinformation is being promoted by birth and breastfeeding professionals as well as parenting gurus as a way to make money. These factions portray doctors as the enemy, and their primary product has become distrust of the medical profession. They created an alternate world of internal legitimacy in the same way that creationists and anti-vaccine activists have done before them, complete with books, journals, conferences, and certifications to signify expertise. The internet has been their greatest enabler, allowing women to research parenting decisions without ever leaving a massive echo chamber. There's far more money at stake. Beliefs about women and their role in society undergird natural parenting. It seems to me to be more than coincidence that natural childbirth, breastfeeding, and natural parenting share a variety of disturbing characteristics. All impose an inordinate amount of work and pain on women, and all ostensibly exclude fathers and other family members, making women not merely the primary caregivers, but the only acceptable caregivers a majority of the time. And by requiring intense around-the-clock effort, they make it nearly impossible for women who want or need something in addition to mothering, a job, a career, free time, to be good mothers. It all seems suspiciously like the classic ploy to judge and control women by the performance of their reproductive organs. When I dove deeper, I was not surprised to find that most of these movements were created or promulgated by elderly white men. Advocates represent natural childbirth, lactivism, and attachment parenting as the ultimate expression of parental love, combining scientific evidence with maternal devotion, feminism, and respect for maternal choice. The reality is far different. These philosophies that gather under the rubric of natural parenting put forth a pro-woman agenda, but in fact are quite the opposite. In this book, I will show the evolution of each of the aspects of natural parenting, natural childbirth, lactivism, and attachment parenting, from their origins to the big business they are today, from a search for authentic experiences to a prescribed experience that relegates women back into old-fashioned rules prescribed by gender. Divided into 3 sections, Pushback tackles the natural parenting industry from all sides, hopefully alleviating the guilt so many women unnecessarily face, revealing it to readers as the damaging, sometimes dangerous construct I think it is. The science. Why is there such a wide gulf between obstetricians, most of whom these days are women, and the proponents of natural childbirth? It's because natural childbirth is not based on science. From birth is safe to interventions are bad to C-sections are almost never necessary, the central tenets of natural childbirth are contradicted by the preponderance of scientific evidence. We will also consider lactivism and attachment parenting. They often go hand in hand with the philosophy of natural childbirth, and women who feel guilty that they failed at birth are often determined, if not desperate, to succeed at the other two at any cost. The industry. If natural parenting does not comport with the scientific evidence, how has it become embedded in the conventional wisdom of contemporary parenting? The reason is that entire industries profit from it. Midwives and doulas derive a substantial proportion of their income from convincing women that natural childbirth is best. The jobs of lactation consultants depend on convincing women to breastfeed. Innumerable courses, workshops, and websites all derive their income from natural childbirth. Birth workers and lactivists have organized themselves into groups that lobby on their behalf, and a variety of nonprofit organizations exist to promote natural childbirth and lobby for it in the halls of state legislature and Congress. This is a large, politically powerful, and lucrative industry. The philosophy. For most of human history, women have been reduced to their uteruses, vaginas, and breasts. The natural childbirth theorists, as well as many lactivists and attachment parenting advocates, continue to reduce women to uteruses, vaginas, and breasts, insisting that how they use those body parts determines their worth as human beings. Ironically, parenting advocates often invoke the language of choice to promote natural childbirth, and lactivism, assuming that if a woman has the power of choice, it is automatically a feminist gesture. But natural parenting advocates in fact do not promote choice. They promote their specific choices and try to shame those women who choose differently. In other words, these movements are judgmental and anti-woman. My goal with this book is to release women from the guilt trap created by the natural parenting industry and to begin a dialogue based in reclaiming safety, common sense, and joy, so that women can mother in whatever way best meets their personal needs and the needs of their families. I've learned over the years that claims like mine require a presentation of my bona fides. No, not my college and medical school training, nor my years of internship, residency, and private practice. I'm talking about my bona fides as a mother, since opponents try to dismiss my presentation of the scientific evidence as sour grapes from someone who couldn't muster the requisite achievements. I have 4 children, all adult or college age now. All were born vaginally after easy labors, 2 with epidurals and 2 without. I breastfed all 4 children until they weaned themselves. I carried them around all the time, and my husband and I had an open bed policy that resulted in many nights of a small child splayed in the middle of our bed and the 2 of us trying to sleep while clinging to the edge, hoping not to fall out. In contemporary parlance, I would be described as an attachment parent, though that terminology did not exist when my children were small. But if I've learned anything from practicing medicine and from more than 25 years as a mother, it is this. What works for me and my family is not necessarily what is best for anyone else. The experience of practicing medicine allowed me to meet people from every walk of life, every ethnic group, and every culture. I learned that there are lots of ways to successfully raise children. That conviction has only been strengthened by watching my children, of my friends, and the friends of my children grow up. Many were raised very differently, and they turned out to be happy, confident, accomplished young adults. A note about midwives. I have always worked with certified nurse midwives, the most highly educated, best trained midwives in the world. The CNMs I worked with were extremely competent and deeply compassionate. Although they may have held strong views on what a good birth meant for them personally, I never saw them substitute their beliefs for a laboring woman's own experience. Unfortunately, in the last 20 years, midwifery has been progressively radicalized, particularly in the UK and Australia, and among midwifery leaders and theorists in the United States. They have promoted themselves as the guardians of normal birth instead of the guardians of the health and well-being of mothers and babies. Many believe they know better than women themselves whether those women need pain relief, should have interventions, or want a vaginal birth. In short, they have replaced the medical patriarchy with the matriarchy. It is this radicalized view of the midwives and their role that I take to task in this book. As I noted above, to hear natural childbirth advocates and lactivists tell it, the entire story of mothering can be reduced to 3 body parts: the uterus, the vagina, and the breasts. I've been thinking about how I have mothered my 4 children over the past 28 years, and it seems as if I have used just about every part of my body. Arms. I used my arms a lot, not just to carry my children, although I carried them quite a bit when they were small. I used my arms primarily to embrace them. Hugs are the appropriate response in times of both happiness and sadness, or for no better reason than to be close. I cannot count the times I hugged my children, and even now, when they are adults, I still do. Hands. I think I spent 10 solid years holding hands. Holding toddlers' hands when they learn to walk. Holding hands crossing the street and in the parking lot. Holding hands just because it is fun to hold hands. I also used my hands to sew clothes for my children, to fill out a million permission sheets for field trips, to feel foreheads for temperatures, and to help with a billion school projects. If anyone needs pipe cleaners, I still have hundreds. Lips. I kissed my children over and over and over again. I kissed boo-boos. I kissed to check for fevers. I kissed for no better reason than I loved to kiss them. Of course, there were years I had to lay off the kissing because public kissing was just too embarrassing for teenagers. But those years are over now, and I can kiss them again, at least when I'm greeting them. Legs. I walked miles holding fretful infants in the middle of the night, shopping for clothes and shoes and toys, tramping out to baseball fields, football fields, soccer fields, and basketball courts to cheer my children on. Mouth. I used it to tell my children that I loved them, but I also used it to advocate for them, to seek out appropriate evaluation and therapy for learning disabilities, to explain them to teachers, to explain life's lessons to them, and to praise them when they did something amazing, which was often. My entire body. Is there anything that gives comfort like a mother's body? It provides comfort when you are awake sitting near your children, and even when you are asleep lying next to them in bed after a nightmare. Brain. I thought about my children constantly, when I was with them and when I was not. I taught them facts and I taught them morals. I worried when they were little, I worried when they were teenagers, and I still worry now. I shared my views on how they should treat others and how they should be proud of themselves, or not, as the case warranted. I conveyed my religious beliefs and my political views. I planned for them. I brainstormed with them. And I hoped desperately that I could give them what they needed to be happy and healthy and to reach their full potential. Last but not least, I used my heart. Of course, I don't mean my physical heart, although it sometimes felt like it when they were hurt or disappointed. I am referring to my metaphorical heart. I loved and I still love my children more than life itself, and I have tried to convey that to them. They and their father are the most important people in the universe as far as I am concerned, and it is my deepest wish that they know it and feel it. Yes, my children grew in my uterus. Yes, they transited my vagina when they were born. Yes, I nourished them with my breasts, but I don't know that made much difference to who they are and to how I love them. I would gladly have had C-sections if there had been even the slightest chance that they were at risk during birth. I would have happily supplemented with formula if I hadn't been lucky enough to produce enough milk. My children don't remember those days, and frankly, they couldn't care less. That's fine with me. Those body parts are not the ones that I want my children to think of when they think of me. I want them to remember holding hands when they were little, countless hugs, and endless kisses. I hope they remember my physical presence beside them when they were sick, next to them in bed when they had bad dreams, and in the bleachers or the audience for sports and plays and graduations. I, like most women, mother with my entire body. Isn't that what good mothers do? Very nice. Go ahead and read a little bit more. So now we're getting into part 1, subverting the science. 1. Natural childbirth is nothing like childbirth in nature. It's a privilege to be an obstetrician and to be invited to witness one of the most important events in the life of a family. I've been present at some spectacular grand entrances, babies born in the emergency room, quadruplets, and a woman who gave birth without knowing she was pregnant, twice. Most end happily, no matter how dramatic they are. I can vividly recall a woman who came in near her due date bleeding very heavily. At the time, I thought I had never seen so much blood. We rushed to the operating room and delivered a rather stunned newborn by C-section. With a little help from the neonatologist, he was fine. I felt traumatized, and I imagined the mother did too. When I visited her on rounds the next morning, I asked if she had any concerns. Indeed she did. She had ordered toast for breakfast and got an English muffin instead. She was incensed. Although obstetrics is generally a happy profession, there are moments of profound sadness. I remember the identical twins whose umbilical cords became tangled in their mother's uterus and the tragic results. I will never forget the baby who was transverse for most of the pregnancy. He finally turned before his mother arrived in labor, but he did not survive the process. And I'm still profoundly saddened when I think about the youngest couple who came in labor with their first child on Christmas Day. They were giddy about having a Christmas baby. Then the nurse couldn't find the baby's heartbeat, and after checking an ultrasound, I had to tell them the devastating news that the baby had died. Obstetrics can be filled with pure adrenaline-driven moments. A baby who is born not breathing, but soon gasps for those first breaths. The baby whose shoulders got stuck and requires extra help coming through the birth canal. The baby whose heart rate drops during labor and stays down for many minutes as we run to the operating room to rescue her. Forget race car driving. Obstetrics has more thrills and chills. I never truly realized how many women believe that childbirth is inherently safe, that a healthy baby is virtually guaranteed, that the worst thing that can happen is getting the wrong breakfast order. It wasn't until I became a blogger that I learned why there is such a gulf between obstetricians' experiences and patients' expectations. I heard from women like Sarah. I was raised in the shadow of Astoria, of my mother's successful unmedicated births and how she refused interventions, including ultrasounds, from medical professionals because she wanted to do things naturally and safely. From elementary school on, I knew what I wanted to do, in fact needed to do. Have an unmedicated birth because that was clearly the best and safest way to do it. Fast forward to 2010 when I was pregnant with my first and only child. I planned to deliver in a hospital with an OB, as had my mother, but was extremely nervous to do so after reading things like Ina May's books and everything from Hensi Gore that I could find. I had developed a birth plan asking for nearly no interventions and felt nervous but positive about my upcoming unmedicated hospital birth. I was devastated when my low-risk pregnancy quickly morphed into high-risk pregnancy in the last trimester. Why hasn't Sarah prepared for the possibility of developing complications? Had she been led to believe that her birth would and should be simple, easy, and safe? And when things didn't go according to plan, why was that cause for devastation? These are the questions that I wrestle with every day. What is leading women to have unrealistic expectations about what the birth process really is? Childbirth Without Fear is the book that started it all. Written by Grantley Dick Reed in 1942, this text is widely viewed as the foundational document of the natural childbirth movement. An international bestseller, the book and its message have been embraced by subsequent generations of women. Most of today's proponents of the natural birth ideas set forth in this pre-World War II book that aren't aware that its author, while an obstetrician, was also a religious evangelical who believed in the spiritual significance of motherhood. According to Dick Reed, childbirth revealed God's presence. He was also a eugenicist whose philosophies about race and gender had a profound impact on his medical practice and would be viewed today as backward at best. Obsessed with the notion that white women of the better classes were ignoring their duty to reproduce in favor of pursuing political and economic equality, Grantley Dick Reed feared a decline in the white birth rate. Women must be socialized to return to the home, he insisted, or the white race risked race suicide. He wrote, "Woman fails when she ceases to desire the children for which she was primarily made. Her true emancipation lies in freedom to fulfill her biological purposes." Part of the problem with declining birth rate of white babies, Dick Reed felt, was that women curtailed their childbearing due to fear of labor pain. Unlike their primitive, Reed, black sisters, who were described by other eugenicists as hypersexual and had easy, painless labor, over-civilized white women had shriveled ovaries, suffered from hysteria, a malady originating in the uterus, hyster for Latin uterus, and had painful labors. White women, he wrote, had been socialized to give birth in pain through the fear, tension, pain cycle. Labor, he believed, is not intrinsically painful. Women experienced pain in labor only because they had been taught to anticipate and fear pain. The fear led them to tightening up, tension, and the tension caused the pain. In other words, the pain felt during labor was not real physical pain, but was imagined, and therefore women could also be socialized to give birth without pain. This is the purported science that Dick Reed cited for his theories, but his fear-tension-pain cycle was fabricated. As we will see, labor is intrinsically painful for the exact same reasons that passing a kidney stone is intrinsically painful. In the Dick Reed School of Natural Childbirth, labor pain served a dual purpose. It was punishment for women who had dared to become over-civilized and glaring evidence that women had veered from their true purpose, that of motherhood. This view reflected the anxieties of social Darwinists and eugenicists as women sought to take their place in the larger society with equal rights such as the right to vote. Victorian and Edwardian physicians and scientists strongly believed that there were fundamental differences between the sexes and the races that led to the ultimate superiority of the white male. According to Dick Reed, the mother is a factory, and by education and care she can be made more efficient in the art of motherhood. A woman's body as a factory? Is this the Old Testament? It is hard to believe that this book launched and remains the Bible for the contemporary natural childbirth movement, a movement now comprised largely of educated women who consider themselves both liberated and informed. Similarly, there were motivations beyond the aid of women involved in the development of Lamaze, the practice of pattern breathing and relaxation popularized in the 1960s in this country to supposedly reduce feelings of pain in labor. Lamaze was born in the post-war Soviet Union, where leaders tried to make a virtue of necessity. They didn't have the painkillers available to ease the pain of birth. Soviet leaders of the time recognized that it was politically expedient to trumpet new discoveries and methods as products of great Soviet scientists. In the 1940s, few Soviet scientists had a greater reputation than that of Ivan Pavlov, a physiologist known for his development of the concept of the conditioned reflex. Pavlov had observed that when a bell was consistently rung for dogs before they received food, they became conditioned to associate the ringing of the bell with the presentation of food. So closely did they associate the bell with the food, they began to salivate when the bell rang even before the food appeared, behavior now known as Pavlovian response. If dogs could be conditioned to associate a bell with food, doctors reasoned that women could be conditioned pattern breathing with pain relief. Then there would be no need for the unaffordable and inaccessible pain medication found in the bourgeoisie West. This method was promulgated by Immanuel Velikovsky and was far more successful politically than medically. It was promoted in Europe as a communist success story. Soviet scientists could relieve pain with methods that were nearly free and therefore accessible to poor women as well as to the rich. Everyone was happy with the method except the Soviet women on whom it was foisted. They found that it didn't relieve their pain. That's not surprising, since it is far easier to condition expectations than to condition effective treatment for pain. The method became known as Lamaze after 1940, when Fernand Lamaze imported the philosophy to French hospitals run by the Communist Party of France, promoting it as an example of the superiority of Soviet science over bourgeois American science. But common sense, when applied to these ideas, prevails. Of course, primitive women from tribal cultures don't have painless labors. Childbirth pain is not caused by fear, and women cannot be socialized or conditioned to give birth without pain. A simple description of female anatomy and how pain works within the body shows that childbirth is simply physically painful. There is no psychological way around this pain. Therefore, many women who attempt to adhere to Grantley Dick Reed's prescription of welcoming childbirth as the true purpose of female existence and trusting rather than fearing birth inevitably fail, for his mandate is impossible. So for these women, childbirth without fear quickly becomes childbirth with guilt. Guilt about feeling pain in labor, guilt about giving in to the relief of painkillers, guilt about the failure to give birth naturally. How did a philosophy based on fabricated claims and designed to manipulate women gain so much traction? Excuse me. The answer is timing. Grantley Dick Reed and Lamaze worked at what was the apogee of paternalism in medicine, when doctors were confident that they knew what was good for patients better than the patients did for themselves. Not surprisingly, women came to resent the cavalier way they were treated on maternity wards. Moreover, childbirth anesthesia, which typically involved unconsciousness, was traditionally reserved for the moment of birth itself, the one moment when women preferred to be awake. There were no epidurals then that could have allowed for painless labor, with women alert and in control throughout labor and delivery. The philosophy of natural childbirth, as put forth by Dick Reed and Lamaze, represented the only way for women to be awake and aware for the births of their children. Natural childbirth became increasingly popular in the 1970s as Americans came to venerate experiences of all kinds for their own intrinsic value. Having an unmedicated vaginal birth, like our foremothers, was portrayed as the ultimate experience and therefore very desirable. The popularity of natural childbirth was further enhanced by the fact that it was initially viewed as transgressive and anti-authoritarian. The belief that childbirth pain is a result of socialization is not the only major misrepresentation on what the philosophy of natural childbirth rests. There are two others: the erroneous claim that anything natural must be safe, and the bedrock assertion of midwives, doulas, and other natural childbirth advocates that childbirth itself is an inherently safe process. Unfortunately, both claims conflict with medical and historical reality. I'll go ahead and stop for tonight because I'm getting kind of sleepy, as I'm sure you can tell, but we'll read a little bit more tomorrow. All right, good night, everyone.